Mr. Vikramjit Banerjee graduated from National Law School of India University, Bangalore in 1997 and completed LLM from the University of Leicester in 2000. He was a former faculty at West Bengal National University of Juridical Sciences. He was also appointed as Nagaland's Advocate General in 2015 and was designated as a senior advocate by the Guwahati High Court in 2016. He went on to become the youngest in the batch of 3 new additional Solicitors General who were appointed at the Supreme Court of India. He is also the first NLSIU graduate to hold this post. Moreover, he has co-edited a book titled The Truth About Teesta Setalvad, which has received much critical attention. He has also appeared in some of the most significant cases in the Supreme Court. We are honored to have you amongst us today, sir. Now, I would like to request our distinguished guest, Mr. Vikramjit Banerjee, to kindly come on stage and address the gathering.
Thank you. Thank you. After the very eloquent, wonderful words of Professor Tandon, it's very difficult to come and speak to you. But I've been invited, and this is a wonderful opportunity, so I will address you as to some of the broader issues on and emerging legal challenges. I would also like to thank Dr. Geeta and Dr. Dwarka, especially the wonderful introduction which she gave me. I don't think I deserve that amount of a wonderful introduction, but then when you come to situations like this, you learn to live with it. Even things which are exaggerated and being too kind about me, we all have to live with that. When I was asked, and my friends, and I saw your wonderful, before I start, I saw your wonderful, really wonderful video. And I think it's a wonderful time you're having in your life. You should enjoy it, because at this point of time, all of us who are there, who joined law school, we all want to change the world. And by the time you come to my age, you realize that you can't change the world. The world changes you. So the only thing which I will say before I address you on the deeper questions which has been asked for me to address you on is that enjoy it. Keep the flame within you for the rest of your life. Keep the flame that you want to change the world, because the world requires people like you to want to change it. The world will have an effect on you. It will try to make you cynical. But remember, at the end of everything, remember these days, whenever you are like me, 10 years, 12 years, 20 years in the profession, always recollect the days when you joined your law schools and when you wanted to change the world. So with that, I'll now come to the major questions major topic which I've been asked to address, which is enabling legal professionals, emerging issues and challenges in the legal education. Now, I don't know how many of you read newspapers, and or at least I think all of you, I don't know whether you have access to Bar and Bench and Live Law. You will notice 2 things happen, and 2 things which are very relevant and which is very important to be flagged. One is the Honorable Chief Justice of India, in an address, specifically flag-marked the issue that National Law School students are not joining the profession. And at the second time also, and this is very much in the news, that there are 4 judges of the Campus Law Center who are now presently members of the Honorable Supreme Court, and they are soon going to be members. 2 of them are going to be sworn in now. So the broad question which arises, And there are 9 judges, I think, of the Campus Law Center at the present moment in the Supreme Court. So the broad question which arises, and this is the question which we all have to face, is we all hear about the great success of the law school model. And all of you who've joined the law school model, the 5-year law school model, as well as myself who studied at the law school in Bangalore, I wonder whether the law school has been as successful in meeting the challenges which Professor Menon set it out when he began his journey. Now, there is no doubt about that, of the fact that law school gets a lot of attention. Even a small achievement gets a huge amount of attention when it comes to any one of the law schools. So we all tend to be in awe of these law schools. But the whole question which I want to put forth to you is it deserving of that? Now, I recollect, in fact, you've all heard of Professor Madhav Menon. I don't know how many of you have heard of Professor Madhav Menon. Professor Madhav Menon was the person who started off this entire 5-year law course, as well as the person who started off the law school model at the National Law School. Professor Menon was my teacher, so there was a lot of interaction with Professor Menon, including the time when I taught for a year at West Bengal National University of Juridical Sciences in Kolkata, which he used to head at that point of time. So Professor Menon, on a number of occasions, would tell me, Vikramjit, the law school model which I started off is finished. It's over. We have to look beyond that. Until the very end, I had a number of conversations with Professor Menon, and Professor Menon, till the very end, continuously spoke about that he was exploring as to what would be the new model of law school, which goes beyond the experiment which he started off in 87. And we all know that every experiment, especially institutional experiments, are time-bound. And I was discussing with Vaibhav, my junior associate, while coming in the car, and Menon was very, very clear on this, that when he started off the law school experiment, it was to address some of the problems which had come to infect law school education in the 70s, largely, and in the early 80s. When examinations were not being held, the entire law schools law colleges all over India had been taken over by strongmen, by student politics, and there was no studies which were being conducted. So according to him, he found the solution, or the people with him found the solution, that you would have a 5-year course where people would be educated straight out of their class 12th examination. So they would be insulated from the political atmosphere and social and academic atmosphere which were then surrounding law education. To that extent, it has been fantastically successful. Make no mistake with that. Today, everybody wants to be a lawyer. It's one of the most in-demand professions. I remember when going to Bangalore and taking the train which we used to take to go from Kolkata to Bangalore, and people would meet me on the train, and the question which everybody asked me is, why are you going to Bangalore to study law? What is there to study in law? Why couldn't you have studied it in Kolkata? And it was completely unknown, and people were surprised. And there used to be a saying in Bangla, I'm sure there were equivalent sayings in various different languages, which said basically, those who have no option in life join the law. And I can in Bangla it's much more interesting, but that's an approximate translation. All of you would have heard it, but that's not true anymore. All of us in our generation and generation upwards want to join legal academia, want to join law firms, want to be litigation lawyers, and law is now a very, very serious profession. So that has changed. Now the question is, does that legal education, which started off in 87 and which is now nearly 30 years old, is still fulfilling the purpose of which it had been set up? Or do we have to do something more? I have some radical suggestions, and I will sort of explain it when I speak. But I'm sure the radical suggestion we may not take the radical suggestions, but you can take some of the suggestions which I, by my experience in being in litigation and being from the law school, and some of the things which I have experienced, and I'll share it with you. Now, to discuss the entire question as to what are the emerging future of the legal education and what are the challenges, we have to sort of break it up in three parts. One is, where is the profession going? Two, what sort of legal education do we need for that future which we are talking about? And three, do we have the infrastructure? And most importantly, the syllabi ready for it. The greatest flexibility which the law schools, national law schools had, and this I can say from my experience of both being a student as well as a teacher at a national law school, was the flexibility which you could set the syllabus and the curriculum. You could actually teach Arthashastra for political science and experiment with any sort of syllabus, whatever you wanted. Now, it's very important in a future changing world to have this flexibility of syllabi, because technology is advancing, social sciences are changing, the tools of learning and working in society are changing. But we have to inculcate this amount of flexibility, and that I think it's a good thing. Now, but to come back to the main question as to where is the profession going? The first point to discuss as to where is the profession going is that you see that there is a huge population in this country, and population is growing, which means that there is more litigation. Irrespective of whatever people tell you, and you will hear this a lot, that litigation is out of fashion, litigation is coming to an end, people are moving out and they are deciding everything in alternate dispute resolutions. Wrong. There is much more litigation, simply because population has exploded. There are a large number of people, so there are very fewer, as to the ratio of judges and people are to that extent much less. We need more judges, we need more lawyers, we need more litigation lawyers. And to meet more litigation lawyers, we need, and this is something which I'm going to flag, we need more rooted and connected lawyers who are aware of the day-to-day issues of the people. And I will, I'll flag this issue for you. The greatest problem of the law school model, and I'm not talking about a 5-year model, I'm talking about the law school model that we all talk about, is that the law schools have disconnected themselves from the reality of India. The reality of India is very, very different, especially in litigation, from that of law schools. When I went to law school, I illustrate this with an example. When I went to law school, we had a wonderful time. We learned, American jurists. We learned sociologists who came from France. And it was great, and we had case methods. But it did not prepare me to work in the district courts, which turned out to be the livelihood. It did not teach me as to how to deal with people, how to deal with people who do not come from, for the want of a better word, from your strata of society. Because the law schools have created oases of excellence, along with oases of the same oasis of elitism. Make no mistake, and I was discussing this with Professor Geeta, that they came from largely from a similar educational background, similar economic background, and I'll illustrate it. And I was illustrating with Professor Geeta that if you look at it, when I studied in the law school, and I look at it in retrospect, everyone whom I knew, largely everyone, there may be one or two exceptions, came from the top English-speaking public schools of their cities. Absolutely the very top. It would be the top 5 English-speaking schools, public schools of their city. It would not even be an ordinary good government school. And that would reflect in the way we interact. That would reflect in the way we related to society. It is another fact, and I sort of attribute, largely my de-education, unlearning process of being in the profession in Kolkata, where I worked in the district courts, by some twist of fate. Where I realized that, how difficult it is to get a photocopy of a petition which you are going to file on time unless you speak nicely and deal very nicely with the photocopier who is going to do your work. How difficult it is to deal with the clerk of the court clerk, if you want a copy of a judgment out in time, a certified copy of a judgment out in time. You realize very clearly that the world exists tremendously outside the rarefied atmosphere which you live in. And this is to all of you. I think the success, and that is the reason why you have 9 judges of the Supreme Court who come from a very, very different background from that of law school. Even though every achievement, every judge, every additional solicitor who is appointed out of the law school gets printed on first page of the bar and bench. But then the bar and bench, I know the bar and bench, are largely people out of the law school. They cover themselves. Legally, India covers itself. It's like you congratulate yourself for your achievements. So, well, good, fine. But there has to be a recognition that there needs to be a fundamental change in which way the law schools are oriented towards. Next is, there is also another way the profession is going. There is increased contractual work which is coming up. There's more business, people are getting into more businesses, people are getting into more transactional deals. But then again, that's what my point is, how many people do you have at a law school who comes from a background of, let's say, studying commerce or businesses, and who have hands-on experience of businesses? So again, because of this strange situation, you are not being connected to reality. There is also, and this is the much in demand of the law schools, there is also an attempt to move away from strictly litigation which we see today. Court-based litigation into alternate dispute resolutions, which we cannot disregard, arbitration, mediation, conciliation. And you will see this, that all commercial courts, you will see this, that the Delhi High Court, have you ever been, all of you who've ever been to the Delhi High Court, if you go to the commercial courts in the Delhi High Court, would see how it's completely different from the normal courts of the Delhi High Court itself. So there is almost an attempt, and I say this, and I'm using words very strongly, by a certain section of lawyers to insulate themselves from the rest of the litigation. The fourth point is people are also increasingly talking about artificial intelligence in law, and but I do not know how it's going to turn out. I do not know how that is going to work out in reality. I have very little understanding, but I can see around me good legal startups. All of us use Pro Vakil, which is a track which tracks your cases in court. And I remember the lawyer Akshat, who came and met me when he was just a young lawyer straight out of law school, who'd worked for 2 years at the Supreme Court, saying, "Sir, I want to go, I have this app which I want to start off." And I said, "Akshat, you are working with one of the top lawyers of the Supreme Court. Why do you want to go off and do this app? Start off on this app?" So Akshat was, "No, sir, I think it's a good idea. I think there's a great market. And sir, if you have any inputs as to how to improve the product, please call me." And I would actually call up and scream at him when my app was not working. But today, Akshat's Pro Vakil is, anyone who practices litigation in India would know, is very popular, and across the board, it's a very, very important tool which lawyers use. So I think even that is a part of the legal profession. Providing services inter se for lawyers is also going to be a very, very important part of the profession in future, which we don't today perceive, but it's happened all across the world. Now, what do we need, therefore? Now, the next question is, what do we need? We need better litigation lawyers. Now, make no mistake, people will say that we need contractual lawyers, we need transactional lawyers, but we need better litigation lawyers. We need litigation lawyers who have the skill for advocacy. Now, I don't know how many of you have heard, advocacy is a skill. Advocacy is how you make an argument in court. Advocacy is how do you convince a judge to agree with you. So every time you stand before the court, you are trying to convince the judge that what you are saying is correct. So that requires you to be good advocates. Now, good advocates requires two things. One is what Professor Tandon also spoke about. And this is something which all of you should remember, that a good advocate does not lie. You read any book on good advocacy, always tells you, never lie. There's a advocacy book which I'm very fond of reading. If you read it. It's called Devil's Advocate by a person called Ian Morley. He says, for heaven's sake, for God's sake, never, never lie to the court, because it destroys your reputation. And once, with any normal person, if your reputation is destroyed, you are not going to be trusted. Now, we need experts on it, and we need people who are able to guide you with skills on it. Now, how does that happen? I, for one, learned all that by working on the original side of the Kolkata High Court. And till today, most lawyers don't learn it in law school, the skills of advocacy. They learn it by actually going to court. So once you graduate from law school, you join the court, you see your senior, you absorb, sort of make out from your senior, this is approximately how he handles the matter. You absorb it, and then you try to replicate it. This is, to my mind, almost, or not almost, this is a 17th to 18th century method. In this method of apprenticeship, that a lawyer should have a junior, that a junior learns the skill from a senior, is what used to be called an apprenticeship. People used to work with their hands and make furniture. People who would make everything, there was an apprenticeship. So while the rest of the world, for science, for business, you moved around and moved away from that to an education which is given to you in school, in colleges, in the law school, it still remains the same. So you actually learn on the job. Now, that's not a perfect education. Similar for even for transactional lawyers. Even for transactional lawyers, people who do transaction, as in writing contracts, people who put up contracts together and deeds together, you don't learn it in law school. That was very least focus. I remember being in law school, the Civil Procedure Code used to be taught extremely cursorily. But it is the Civil Procedure Code, it is the Transfer of Property Acts, which are actually your bread and butter. So effectively, when I came out of the law school, it prepared me for wonderful questions of constitutional law, which how many of us get the opportunity to argue? Even today, I don't get to argue constitutional law in Supreme Court too much. Whenever I raise an issue of the constitutional law in Supreme Court, and this is off the record, even though I'm on camera, the court will tell me, "Nani, Mr. Banerjee, address us on the bread and butter law first, address us on substantive law first, then you can make your constitutional law point." And I remember my first matter, I argued before the High Court at Kolkata, and there was a very, very famous judge, and I was from law school, so I took out all my books on constitutional law, and it was about some a student not being admitted into a school. So I cited violations of Article 14, I cited Article discrimination, 4 judgments on discrimination. The judge collapsed laughing. He said, "Mr. Banerjee," he knew me, he distantly knew me, so he said, "Mr. Banerjee, I'm sorry, this is not the scope of the argument here. Constitution you can argue later. Show us what are the norms of admission. Show us, go to the page, take out what the West Bengal government has said, and then we'll decide." So, at the end of the day, this is not what is taught. The Civil Procedure Code is not taught. Your writ rules are not taught. Your contempt rules are not taught. Or Criminal Procedure Code is not taught. All of us, and I know my friends who are criminal lawyers, who are very successful criminal lawyers, they learned their Criminal Procedure Code as working with seniors. We need to concentrate more on procedural, transactional, but more related to on the ground. We also need people who are experts in science, in IP law, for the purpose of IP law, IT law, and environmental laws. Where are the scientific knowledge, where are the lawyers who are great in science? You look at anywhere in America, which is the place for intellectual property law, you will see there are lawyers who have degrees at the best places in science and who are doing law. And any one of you know sort of legal educational history, Professor Mitra tried to start off something like that by starting off that IIT law school in Kharagpur. It produces the only sort of people, especially on intellectual property law, who have a knowledge of patent law to any extent is the people from that law school because of their background in engineering. Because Professor Mitra was very clear that I will admit only people who have an engineering degree. So some of the best IP lawyers now with a background come from that. So that's an interesting thing. But we need more people who are experienced in that. We also need people who are experienced in electricity, competition, company law, and insolvency. We need more people who are keyed into commercial developments. There is also a huge and increasing need of people who are aware of regulatory issues. Because most of litigation and differences, and you've been hearing it, are moving away from the courts into specialized regulatory courts. Insolvency, company law, electricity, telecom. So some of your most viable commercial matters are moving into separate tribunals. So to that extent, we also need lawyers who have that sort of an experience. Now, crux of it, what sort of educational model are we looking at? Now, there are 2 models. I don't know whether you know or whether you haven't. You are aware, I assume, that there are 2 models. Either you can go for a 5-year model, which all of you are in. That is after class 12, then there is 5. or there is a 3+3 model, whereby you go, you graduate, you work for 3 years, and then after you finish your graduation, you do your law for 3 years. Now, this is the model which is prevalent in America and in Britain as well, whereby you do your undergraduation and then you do your law, which is unlike what we do in India, where you have a composite 5-year law course. Now, the problem which I feel is of the 3-year and 3-year model is that the syllabi is very outdated. And we were discussing with my junior associate Vaibhav on the way that the syllabi in 3+3 is extremely outdated. There is a lack of infrastructure. And I have again a grouse to mark here, at least amongst the states, and this does not apply to this university, but amongst the state would rather fund an elite law school with all sorts of infrastructure than improve the lot of the regular law school of a 3 and 3-year-old model. So you see the standard of the facilities available in campus law center, while you see the products of the campus law center. And if there is one person out of the National Law School who becomes an additional Solicitor General, it becomes like the great news, everybody, and there are like numerous people out of campus law centers who have become additional Solicitor Generals, and even if there are, I think I can count, there are 3 from the Bombay, GLC Bombay, and no one cares because that's normal. So you have stopped backing that. And it also has large number of students. The greatest thing about a 3-year, 3+3 is that it has the largest number of students. But there is very little investment. It's almost the stepchild. I'm putting a strong word. It is almost the stepchild of legal education. It shouldn't be. Because in the world, you only get into law once. In the rest of the world, you only get into law once you finish your graduation exam. Whether it be in America, you finish your undergraduation, then you do a JD. In Britain, you do your undergraduation, then you do your bar or your solicitor's exam, and they have a curriculum why you follow that, which is to learn to be an advocate, skills of being an advocate, or skills of being a transactional lawyer. Now, again, I'll come to the controversial part. The other model is the NLS model. The NLS model at the top is, I find, too social science heavy. This is my experience. And I'm not running down, I have wonderful friends. I love my social science teachers. I had a great time. But as a practicing lawyer, I still cannot figure out, with deepest amount of respect to everybody, is what did Durkheim's theory of anomie have to do with my litigation? I'm not running anything down. I'm just saying that I cannot find, it's too social science heavy. Should it include other subjects? I think it should. I think science should be included. I think commerce should be included. We have a one-off BBA LLB, we have a one-off BCom LLB, but till today, and I can speak for the National Law School, it is social science heavy. I learned T.H. Green, and this is not a joke, I'm saying that by a teacher who's I'm very fond of, and I really look up to. He's been a great mentor to me, but he also taught me political science too at the law school, where he taught me T.H. Green's and his theory of federalism. The Constitution of India has a separate structure. And I can assure you, I can't quote T.H. Green before any court. So, that's the entire question which I have. They're wonderful people, but I'm saying that we need to work on these things. The second is, which I flag marked, it's too elitist. It is too elitist. If you get elitists from every part of India to study in a law school, you will get an elitist law school. They will hang around and do elite things. And it's a fact that they will have their 1 feet in America because that is the economic background, that is the social background which they come from. They are not interested to work in district courts. They are not interested. It doesn't interest them. They are completely cut off from the reality of India. Now, therefore, as a result, they are too out of touch. They are too out of touch for the reality of India. They are socially not enough connected. Now, what sort of legal education do we need? We need an education which, as I stressed, has to be close to the people. It has to be close to the ground. And it has to, and I say this to all of you who are going to join litigation, you have to know the local language. When I studied in law school, and because of the background where I studied from, and all of us studied from these wonderful English medium, public school educated, we couldn't care at anything which was from the local language. Anyone who's been to English public school knows how you look at people who teach you Bangla or Hindi. You look at how you treat the teachers who teach Bangla and Hindi. So actually we were completely cut off. So when I went to Kolkata and a very complicated lease document came to me in Bangla, I was like, or a witness statement of witnesses who had come and spoken had come to me in Bangla, which was supposedly my second language, because my first language, like all of us, was English. I was like, I didn't know. It could have been Greek or German to me. Now that is an extremely difficult proposition. You will have to learn Hindi if you're going to practice in Hindi. You will have to learn Punjabi if you're going to practice in Punjab. Make no mistake. And we need an education which connects us to that. We had, and I say this, in law school, you had specialized classes to teach people English. But you had no classes to teach people local languages. And as a litigation lawyer, irrespective of anything, you need understanding, a very clear understanding of local languages. The second, we need lawyers who are grounded. We need lawyers who can relate to common people. We need lawyers who are not arrogant of being lawyers. I think all of us, by the time you're all going to graduate, we are going to think like, I am a lawyer. So I'm like this, I am the source of all knowledge, I know everything. Anyone who's not a lawyer is like down there. And the more successful you become, the more arrogance becomes. If you go from one of these law schools, because whether you deserve it or you don't deserve, you already have that. We need to get rid of that. We need lawyers who are grounded. And people were grounded. In a generation before us, you speak to, I have interacted with Ramjit Malani. Ramjit Malani has taught me in law school. I worked with Ramjit Malani. He's no more. God bless him. But you could not find a more connected, rooted person than Ramjit Malani. Irrespective of the fact that he was possibly, and if you sat with him in a conference in criminal law, and I've done on some very important matters, he would be working more hard at his age than you would be working. I remember at a conference in a very, very high stakes matter, me sitting with him, and I was a young boy straight out of law school, joined the profession, and not only straight out of law school, I'd moved from Kolkata to Delhi, Supreme Court matter, where there were it was this room full of people who were working on this legal problem. Matter was coming up next day or day after. And there were only two people. I was the youngest person, so I was supposed to go through all the draft line by line. And the only other person who was going through the words, everything line by line, was Ramjit Malani. And he would relate to every person who you met on a one-to-one level, on a person you would think he's your friend. And it didn't matter which strata, he didn't care from where you came from, what your background was. That was there. I have seen lawyers who are like that in a generation before us. What has happened to us? Including me. And as for you, that's my advice to you. Remember where you come from. Remember the society which you come from. You can't have an arrogance of knowledge, however successful you may be. Your Mercedes-Benz does not entitle you to belittle your clients. Because at the end of the day, your earning comes from your clients. Your earning comes from your society where you come from. We also need to have an education system which, as I flag marked, which teaches people good advocacy. How to argue matters in court, how to speak in court, how to dress for court, how to be presentable in court, how to not cut corners or lie in court. See, of course, to that extent, when I heard Professor Tandon speaking, I said, maybe you cannot choose actually whether your client is lying or not lying till the very last moment. Whether murderer or not murderer, as Ram Jethmalani always used to say, we asked him when he came to class to teach us evidence. So all of us, not all of us, it's largely, the girls got up and said, sir, how can you, and I'm not being sexist, but they did get up and they all asked Professor Jethmalani, and said, sir, how can you defend a criminal? So he gave us 3 reasons, and this is my answer to Professor Turner. He said, one, there is no law which asks you not to murder. There is a law which says that if you murder someone and you get caught under these circumstances, without falling under these exceptions, then it would be treated as murder, then you will be punished in such a way. So if you don't fall into these exceptions, then you're not a murderer. So I only try to see whether people fall. Then he gave a second example. He gave an example which is, there was a king of England, and I forget the name, I think it was, but there was a king of England, and he had been brought up in those days with his attorney general. The attorney general then used to be directly appointed by the king of England. So he been brought up by the attorney general as 2 very close, almost like brothers. They've been brought up together. And they were very close. Then there was a person who wrote a poem against the king. So he was automatically tried for sedition. And then at sedition would mean that you automatically had the death penalty imposed on you, again, writing against the king. And there was no one willing to take up his case because they were afraid that the king will come down hard on them. So the attorney general resigned his post as attorney general to take up the defense of the person because everybody deserves the defense. And the third point he gave was, I think, from Mahabharata, which I think is again a very interesting example, like all examples of Mr. Jethmalani. He gave an example. He said in Mahabharata, Drona was a wonderful person. Now, I won't go into too much of detail, but Drona and Drupad had problems amongst themselves. So Drupad wanted to do a sacrifice in which a person would be produced who would eventually kill Drona, which happens. In Mahabharata, that is actually what happens. So Drishtadumna, I think, kills Drona, who is the son of Drupad and the brother of Draupadi. So he wants to do that sacrifice. Now everybody refuses. He goes to all sorts of people to do that sacrifice. They refuse, saying that we don't want to do it. Drona is a great man. He's a great learned person. We don't want to be part of this. Then he goes to the guru of the Rakshasas, who says, Asuras, who says, yeah, I'll do it for you. And he says, recommend someone to do it for him. So he says, I will recommend someone to do it for you. And these two priests agree to do the yajna for him. So after they agree, Drupad goes and asks him, he said, why are you doing it? You know, everybody's refused. How come you're doing it? So he gave 2 reasons. He said, see, if I do the yajna and as a result, Drona is not killed, good, great. But if I do the yajna and as a result Drona is killed, then Drona was anyway to be killed. I was just the nimitta. I was just the means. So in any case, it's all in humor. Don't take this as seriously. But the fact of the matter is also, do not forget that everyone deserves a defense. Everyone deserves a defense. And it is your duty as a lawyer to try your level best so that everyone gets that defense. But that defense should be made without lying, without falsifying anything. And I can assure you, and if you sort of construe everything what Ram Jethmalani said together, that is what he was telling us. That you have to create a defense which is within the law without cutting corners. Because everybody does deserve a defense. Because it is not up to you to judge who is what he is. But you can't falsify documents, you can't cut corners, you cannot lie to the court. We need lawyers like that. We also need, and the last sort of, in litigation lawyers, we need people who are specialists. We definitely need people who are specialists, people who have an understanding of business, people who have an understanding of commerce. We need people who have an understanding of science. And we need people who can, increasingly, we need such specialists to come into the system. In transactional law, people are going to write deeds. There are also going to be a lot of lawyers, a lot of us are going to write deeds. We need people who understand the nitty-gritties of day-to-day business. We need people who are going to understand how contracts are done. So we need people of that background. And we need people who are creative. We need lawyers who are creative. And for that, creative solutions for business people. And for that, we need people who are rooted within society. Coming to, therefore, my conclusion is that, therefore, I think if there is, and I'm flagging this, that if there is to be a future of the legal education system, and I'm talking, it possibly lies in grounding our education system and making our legal education system more practical, more workable, more useful. And we've again had these wonderful words, and being from law school, ma'am, I've heard these wonderful words of being social engineers from the beginning I joined law school. But I think, and I'll again differ with you, saying that in the excuse of being social engineers, we have studied too much of sociology. We need good people. We need good human beings who can be a part of the process, because it's individuals who change the system. It is not, when you talk about being social engineers, it is too much of it is now too often used as an excuse of unscrupulous people who give larger excuses for their own benefit. So whenever I tell my students, say, don't be social engineers, just be a good person. Be a good human being, be a good lawyer, and everything will change. I think, in conclusion, I agree with what Professor Menon said, that the law school model which he found in 87 is largely over. I would be using a strong word, but I'm saying it's largely over. It's fulfilled its purpose. What it requires, and this again, Professor Tandon would appreciate. He told me the future of law schools, and he always told me, are in private law schools. Because he said, it is private law schools who can give people an education which will make legal education practical and applicable to reality. Today I am in TIPS, and I am sure TIPS will go forward and fulfill its role. And to all of you who are on your way towards this wonderful journey of law, which we are all part of, which we enjoy and which we live for every day, my advice to you is enjoy the joyride. Enjoy the ride. That's extremely important. But don't forget the little people. Thank you. Jai Hind.